made a video a few days ago about the unboxing of my new book, Black Art, and I'd like to just say a few words about the book itself as a bit of an introduction. The novel actually began its life on the MA in creative writing, which I did at Teesside University. One of the modules on the MA was screenwriting, which I'm familiar with. And as one of my assignments, I decided to write the opening, what's called the first act of a screenplay, which turned out to be Black Art. I'd had the idea for a while, and I basically wrote the first act, which is approximately about 20 to 25 pages, and then I sketched out in outline form the actual following narrative because I didn't have time to actually write the full screenplay in only 2 or 3 weeks. Then a process happened which is the reverse of what would normally happen. You are obviously familiar with the idea that you might take a novel and make a screenplay, write a screenplay based on that novel. What I did was the opposite. I wrote a novel, a thriller as it turned out to be, based on the screenplay, or at least based on the opening 15 to 20 minutes of a screenplay. So this is the actual novel itself. This is Black Art, and I just want to give you a few little pointers in terms of the way it was written and what it's about, without revealing any major spoilers along the way. This is a live broadcast. There's no editing here, so if there are any sort of glitches, then I apologize for those in advance. Okay, so the idea behind the novel is the art that was stolen and appropriated by the Nazis during World War II, especially in France and in particular in Paris. The book opens with a prologue which is set in 1940, but the rest of the novel is set in the present day in 2016. And there are certain events from that particular year which are referenced in the novel. It's a high action love story as well as a thriller, and I suppose it does betray its origins in a film script. When it came to the actual writing process, that's probably the most interesting thing that I can talk about here, because it doesn't really involve any spoilers as such. I'd already decided that I would set myself a target, and I did even mention writing somewhere in the region of 500 words a day. That was quickly abandoned. If you're going to write a novel like this, you do need to do a lot of research and reading, and above all, thinking about your characters, about their situation, about their location, how they speak, how they react to other people. The tiniest details, you need to know them in great detail. So weeks went by, and even months went by without actually writing a thing. That's strictly not accurate. Yes, I did write material down. What would very often happen is you'd be thinking about the book throughout the day, you'd be reading things, and of a night time I would write things down, or at least I would record things on my mobile phone, on the little device that lets you record audio messages. I would make notes, and then I would transcribe them the following day to the computer. Email just come in. I wasn't aware that that would interrupt proceedings, but anyway. So that was what happened for some time while I was getting myself into the right frame of mind to actually write the book. The analogy I would make would be between climbing Mount Everest, because writing a novel is just like that. It's just as difficult. You wouldn't turn up at base camp in a pair of trainers and expect to be able to climb Mount Everest, because you'd be dead within a couple of hours. You need to acclimatise yourself to the rarefied air of that particular location. You need to have accurate maps, you need to have equipment in place, you need to have assistance in place, communications, etc., etc. It would probably take you months to prepare. So when I eventually came to actually write, the process of writing was relatively straightforward. I would definitely like to put on record that I never once suffered from writer's block, ever. Because once you know the subject matter inside out, and know your characters inside out, it really is impossible to suffer from writer's block. So, because I was intending to send the first 3 chapters of Black Art to an agent, that's the usual procedure that you would follow, I decided eventually to send those 3 chapters to my beta reader, Stuart. That was a big mistake, but it was also a terrific idea. It was a big mistake because once I'd sent the first 3 chapters merely to get some sort of feedback in terms of whether he liked them or not, this was, of course, the equivalent of opening Pandora's box. I couldn't shut the box again. There was no way I could then say, oh, but I'm not going to send you any more chapters. So the inevitable happened. Stuart emailed me back and said, could I see some more? Well, of course I sent him some more. I sent him chapter 4, then chapter 5, and chapter 6, and so on. But eventually it reached the position when I had no more further material to be able to send him. So now I was put in a very difficult position. I could either A, not send him any more material, or B, I could. And that meant doing something completely different to my normal routine. The great writer Stephen King has written a book called On Writing. It's one of the set texts on the creative writing course that I did at Teesside University. It's a great book, and in that book he makes a distinction between 2 different sorts of writer. The first sort of writer he calls a plotter, and that's me. The second sort of writer he calls a pantser. It's got nothing to do with German tanks in the Second World War. This is somebody who literally writes by the seat of their pants. My friend Nick is a complete 100% pantser. So, when it came to actually having to write these new chapters, I had to become a pantser for the very first time. And that was both terrifying and also exhilarating at the same time. I think the reason why I felt it was terrifying was because I had this feeling that perhaps I might go off in the wrong direction, that I might start writing something and then several chapters later I would look back and think, this is all wrong, this doesn't work, and have to scrap it all. I don't think it was a case of being fearful of just producing some work that was shit. It was more a case of producing work that was good, but that at the end of the day didn't fit the novel. The thing that I learned from that procedure was that trust the novel, because it knows where to go. In fact, I would make this assertion, this observation. Although I don't believe in such ridiculous concepts as possession, in the sense of demonic possession, as in The Exorcist, I mean, unfortunately, these kind of cases are more a case of suffering from schizophrenia rather than there being any sort of diabolical possession at work. But in terms of the actual writing experience of becoming a pantser, for example, I think that is the closest that anybody can ever get to being possessed. Because let me make no bones about it. I didn't write black art. Black art wrote through me. I was the vessel, I was the medium through which black art expressed itself. There'd be times I'd be writing and I'd be thinking, what the hell is happening now? Where on earth are we going? Because I didn't know. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And in a sense, I think you could say that that's a good thing, because if I didn't know, then you as the reader won't know either. And I can give you one specific example of this, just to do with the last chapter. So it's a minor spoiler, but I mean, even mentioning things like the name of a character is also technically a spoiler. But this won't affect your enjoyment of the novel at all. It's to do with the final chapter, and basically this is one of these cases where you bring your characters on stage, and it's almost them sort of bowing to the audience and saying their goodbyes, like at the end of a play, like the end of The Tempest, for example. And I decided to bring back my German detective, who plays quite a role in the novel. He's called Polizeikommissar Weber. And if I remember rightly, the sentence that I wrote at the time, which has obviously since been revised, but the original sentence went something like this. It should come as no surprise that Polizeikommissar Weber made an appearance with his boyfriend. And I thought, with his boyfriend? Where did I suggest that Polizeikommissar Weber was gay in this novel? I didn't. It was the novel that decided he was gay. And I thought, wow, that's great. Weber's gay. Brilliant. Now, I want to put that on record, because I'm sure there'll be people out there when they read the novel would think, oh, he's just ticking some sort of political correctness box here. Oh, he's got a character who's Asian, the heroine. He's got one of the helpers who's black. And now he's got a policeman who's gay. It wasn't like that at all, trust me. It was the novel that decided, the story that decided for me. So as I say, that's probably the best example that I could give you of the way in which the novel wrote itself through me. So I hope that's been an interesting introduction to the book itself. And all I would say now is, here it is, Black Art. It's available on Amazon in paperback and as an ebook, and I would urge you to buy it. So on that note, I'm going to end this video.